October 27, 1962. The world held its breath. For 13 days, the United States and the Soviet Union had stared at each other like two cowboys in a deadly standoff. The Soviets had placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. The Americans demanded their removal. President John F. Kennedy warned, if those missiles weren't taken down, there would be war. Then came the moment. A U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba by Soviet forces. President Kennedy's advisors begged him to retaliate. Bomb Cuba. Attack the sites. Strike first. And in this version of history, he did. At 6:15 p.m. Washington time, American jets roared off from Florida air bases. Their mission: destroy the missile sites near Havana. The first wave hit targets with precision. Bright orange fireballs lit up the Cuban sky. Silos exploded. Soviet soldiers on the ground were caught off guard. Some fled. Others fired back with anti-aircraft guns. But hidden deep in a bunker outside Havana was General Issaplayev, the Soviet commander in charge. He believed this was the beginning of an American invasion. He didn't wait for orders. In a state of panic, he launched a single nuclear missile. It flew for only minutes. Then it hit Key West, Florida. The explosion shook the earth. A mushroom cloud rose high into the sky. A bright light flashed. Then everything turned black. Over 60,000 people died instantly. Thousands more were burned, poisoned, or crushed in the blast. Within 10 minutes, President Kennedy got the news. America had been hit. A quiet fell over the White House. Everyone waited. What would he do? Would he strike back? He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He walked into the Situation Room, and then he gave the order. Full retaliation. Launch everything at Soviet missile sites. Prepare targets in Eastern Europe and the USSR. Across the world, sirens screamed. In Moscow, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev woke to news that Cuba had been bombed and the U.S. had been hit in return. His generals wanted revenge. Within minutes, Soviet submarines began launching missiles from the Atlantic. 3 of them were already near the U.S. coastline. One missile struck Washington, D.C., destroying the White House and the Capitol. Another hit New York City. The third missed its target but exploded over rural Pennsylvania. Millions were gone in seconds. In response, the U.S. launched hundreds of ICBMs from bases in the Midwest. They crossed the ocean, arched over Europe, and slammed into Soviet cities: Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, Stalingrad. Each city vanished under a burning cloud. Meanwhile, U.S. allies in NATO began firing on Warsaw Pact countries. Britain launched missiles. France followed. China, seeing an opportunity, invaded Taiwan and prepared for conflict with both superpowers. Within a single day, over 200 nuclear bombs were detonated across the planet. The skies turned red and black. Firestorms raged. Winds carried deadly radiation across continents. Crops burned. Animals died. Power plants melted down. The internet hadn't been invented yet, but radios and TVs went silent. People ran. People screamed. But there was nowhere to go. Shelters were too few. Hospitals were gone. Cities became tombs. In Canada, Australia, and South America, places not directly hit, people watched the clouds roll in. Thick, black, poisonous clouds. And they realized the world was dying. In a small village in Brazil, a teacher named Maria turned to her students and said, "Remember this moment. If we survive, we must never forget what pride and fear can do." On a U.S. Navy ship drifting in the Pacific, a young sailor looked at the darkened sky and whispered, "We killed the future." In a broken Kremlin, Khrushchev sat in silence. His advisors were dead. His cities were ash, and he muttered, "This was never the plan." The world had changed in just 24 hours. Billions wouldn't live to see the aftermath, but for those who did, survival would be the next war. The bombs stopped falling. The fire faded. But the war was far from over. After one terrible day in 1962, the world changed forever. Cities were gone. Leaders were dead. Silence covered the planet like a heavy blanket. And then the cold came. It started with the sky. Dark clouds blocked out the sun. Smoke from hundreds of nuclear blasts mixed with dust and ash. This created a thick layer in the upper atmosphere, circling the globe. No sunlight, no warmth, no growing food. This was nuclear winter. In some places, summer turned to snow. In others, crops rotted in the frozen soil. The temperature dropped by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius across the globe within weeks. Even in Africa and South America, lands untouched by bomb plants began to die. Animals starved, rivers froze. In the U.S., what remained of the military took over. The president was gone. A general took command from a secret mountain bunker. He tried to calm the few cities still standing, but there was no electricity, no fuel, no food trucks. People fought in the streets over cans of beans. In small towns, neighbors turned on each other. Stores were looted. Firearms ruled. Radio broadcasts sent one repeating message: shelter, water, stay underground. But it wasn't enough. Most had no shelters, and those who did, they began to run out of supplies. In what used to be the Soviet Union, it was worse. Moscow was a graveyard. So was Leningrad. Millions died in the blast. Millions more from radiation. The survivors huddled in caves and forests. Government systems vanished. Food dropped by parachutes from emergency aircraft, but not enough, not nearly enough. Starving groups roamed the countryside, begging, stealing, sometimes killing. In Ukraine, an old woman wrote in her journal, "We survived the war, but not the peace. The snow does not melt. The children do not laugh." Radiation sickness spread silently. At first, people just felt tired. Then came the burns, the vomiting, the hair falling out. Babies were born with strange shapes. Animals died within days of touching poison water. The wind carried invisible death. People wore cloth over their faces, thinking it would help. It didn't. Even rain became a curse. Black rain. They called it thick, dirty water that burned the skin. And then came the silence. No more radio. No more news. No more countries. The world broke into small groups, villages, tribes, survival camps. Some turned to religion, others to warlords. Many just gave up. In Canada, people formed a coal commune, sharing everything, growing mushrooms underground, living in quiet order. In India, thousands walked barefoot across deserts, looking for a clean land that didn't exist. In Australia, a group of scientists hid in the mountains and tried to rebuild the internet with old computers. They failed, but they kept trying. The year 1963 came and went. No New Year's fireworks, no celebrations. Just snow, hunger, and death. People forgot birthdays. No one counted money anymore. Time itself felt broken. One man in a bunker scribbled on the wall each day. Day 147, still alive. Then the next day, day 148, heard voices outside, didn't open. Eventually, the mark stopped. The United Nations? Gone? World governments? Collapse? NATO and the Warsaw Pact? Names in history books buried in ash. The nuclear war ended the world as we knew it. Not with a long battle. Not with peace talks. But with one panicked decision. And chain reactions that followed. Still, there were survivors. A few lucky ones in underground shelters. Some hidden deep in the forest. Others simply got lucky, born far from cities, living off the land. They told stories around fires of how life used to be, of electric lights, warm beds, and flying machines. Children listened with wide eyes, thinking it was all fairy tales. They had never seen a light bulb, never tasted an apple, never known sunlight on their skin. By 1965, the planet had lost 70% of its population. Most animals were gone. Forests were dying. The oceans were sick. But still, people tried. In Norway, a group of engineers built wind-powered radios to send messages. In Chile, farmers started growing food in underground greenhouses lit by old car batteries. In Alaska, two families merged and taught their children how to read using pages from burned books. The human spirit had not died. It was badly wounded, but it still breathed. One child, born in the ruins of London, asked her mother, "Will the world ever be green again?" The mother didn't answer. She just held her close, because no one knew. No one remembered how to fix the sky. But some believed that maybe one day the ash would clear. The sun would return, the trees would grow, and the children of this broken world would rise not to build bombs, but to build peace. 10 years had passed since the sky went dark. It was 1972 now. The earth was still cold. The air still dry. Crops were rare. Trees were bones. The people were alive. Fewer than before, much fewer, but alive. And from the ashes of the old world, something began to grow. Deep in the mountains of what used to be Switzerland, a group of survivors had built something new. They called it Nova Terra, New Earth. It wasn't a city, not yet, but it was the closest thing the world had to a nation. People came from all directions: Germans, Italians, Poles, Russians, even a few Americans who crossed the sea on makeshift boats. They carried only what they had: old radios, seeds, scraps of metal, books, memories, no flags. No borders, no leaders, just hope. Nova Terra had rules. No weapons allowed. Everyone works. All food is shared. No bombs. Ever again. The old ways were gone. The survivors had seen what pride and power could do. They refused to repeat it. They built their homes out of stone and salvaged wood. They grew mushrooms in caves, raised goats, purified water from melted ice. Each week, they held memory nights. On those nights, the elders told stories of airplanes, of cities with blinking lights, of the internet, a magic book that lived inside a screen. The children laughed. They thought it was all fiction. One girl named Amira, 12 years old, asked her father, "Did the earth ever have music?" Her father, once a musician in Paris, showed her a broken guitar. "I played this on a stage once," he said. "What's a stage?" She asked. Far away in what used to be Canada, another group tried to build something too. But their leader, a former general, ruled with fear. His people wore gas masks, carried guns, and mined old cities for scraps. They called themselves the Iron Teeth. They didn't want peace. They wanted to control the last of the world. When word of Nova Terra reached them, they sent a message: "Join us, or be swallowed." There is no future without power. Nova Terra sent nothing back. They didn't want war, but they knew it was coming, so they prepared. Not with weapons, but with unity. Blacksmiths made tools. Engineers fixed old turbines to generate power. Farmers taught every child how to plant food. They created a council, not one ruler, but many voices. Every person, no matter where they came from, could speak. They didn't rebuild the old world. They started a new one. One winter evening, a stranger arrived. He was tall, sickly, wrapped in plastic and fur. He carried an old briefcase. Inside were blueprints for a wind-powered communications tower. "I found these in a Swedish library," he said. "I think we can talk to the rest of the world." The council agreed. They worked day and night. After months of building, testing, failing, and trying again, the tower stood tall above the snow-covered peaks. A switch was flipped. The signal crackled to life. For the first time in 10 years, the world spoke. A voice came through, faint but clear. "This is the South American Peace Camp. We hear you." "We're alive?" Another voice. "This is the Nigerian Coast Outpost." "Thank God. We thought we were alone." Then, "This is Japan. We have a school, children. We're rebuilding." One by one, messages poured in from across the earth. The world had not ended. It had simply paused. And now it was waking up. The Iron Teeth heard the signals too. They saw hope spreading, and they hated it. So they attacked. 100 armed raiders marched on Nova Terra. They demanded food, tools, the tower. But Nova Terra didn't fight with guns. They stood as one. Children, elders, farmers, teachers all together. They showed the raiders what they had built, how they shared, how they lived without rulers, without hate. And something strange happened. Some of the raiders, tired, hungry, afraid, put down their guns. They stayed. They joined. The others turned back. There was no war. Not this time. In the years that followed, Nova Terra helped build other towers. Africa, South America, parts of Asia, people began to connect. There were no countries anymore, no borders, just small communities bound by one rule: never again. They created a book called The Final Memory. It was passed from one place to another, copied by hand. It told the story of the old world, the bombs, the burning sky. And on the last page it said, "If you are reading this, you have survived. You are the world now. Build it with kindness. Remember us." By the year 1990, the sun returned. The sky turned blue for the first time in decades. Grass pushed up through the dirt. Trees began to grow again. Birds sang. Amira, now a teacher, stood in a green field with her students. "Look up," she said. "That's what the world used to look like." One boy asked, "Will we ever have planes again?" She smiled. "Maybe. But this time, let's build them to bring people together, not drop bombs." The world didn't end in 1962. It shattered. But from the broken pieces, something new was born. Not perfect, but better. And all because people remembered and chose not to repeat.